Hey, welcome back to another out of spec video. This is no car, as you could probably tell. This is a Zero motorcycle, the latest from the hallmark manufacturer of electric motorcycles based in Santa Cruz, California. Now, I am not in Santa Cruz. This is Park City, Utah, one of the best places on earth. I guess, at least in the US, at least I love it. But bias aside, this is a fun place to experience and try this brand new Zero. So, finally, this is the bike I have been waiting for. The final piece of the puzzle of Zero's model line update strategy. It all started with the SRF in 2020 when they had their first, quote, new gen bike, and we finally have the new Sport Adventure flagship. This is the latest culmination of 15 years of the brand's progress. Their first model was an off-road dirt bike made by an ex-NASA employee basically in a garage, very Silicon Valley stereotype. And now we have this, something relatively off-road capable. Not exactly on the hardest trail, it's a fire road more or less, but still super fun. Though I'm admittedly a big fan of these bikes in general, I'll be critical where deserved. There's been some criticism with some of the latest bikes, though I think most of that stems from the Cypher store and the upgradable paywall options. I have thoughts on that, but that's for another time. This is all about DSR X. So, what does the X stand for? Experiences, explore? It's actually kind of up to you. They don't have an exact response. I mean, none of them do. Kind of like the E and the FXE they unveiled last year. They kind of left it up for interpretation. It just was a new name to add to kind of a brand new bike. So here's what I'm hoping to find out, and you'll be able to find out with me. DS means dual sport, so we had the DSR, R kind of meant racing. So the dual sport nomenclature basically means it can do roads and also trails, so on-road and off-road. We're touching both today, so what can it do? Is it a master of all trades, or is it just a beautiful, compromised mess? Let's find out. So first, what's new? Well, I guess what's old. This 2007 was the first Zero, dirt and off-road, very rudimentary roots with that old model. And then in 2013, they created their first motor from the ground up. So they've now had almost a decade of that ground up development of motors and even batteries, and they've had a lot of research, they've learned a lot of things. So now 15 years in company experience plus all that R&D, you have this culminating with that, and that's what I'm considering to be the new flagship, which I don't think people expected. The DSR before, the prior generation, was basically just an SR, but with like off-road tires. Like there weren't really that many differences, especially looks-wise. It looked like almost identical, which could be good or bad. They really took this in a different approach. Looks kind of like the SRS, but very just leaning into that more off-road adventure capabilities. So Zero's trying to keep experience in mind with this, adventure riding in mind. They say, go, have an adventure, escape, have some freedom, maybe a dose of range anxiety. It really depends on the rider, I guess. But yeah, with the old model, that was my first Zero experience, but it really captivated me. And that's where my enthusiasm comes from. I was expecting range anxiety because the range really varies, and we'll get to that later, but it varies on riding style, speed, all that stuff. But I want to definitely curb my enthusiasm in light of the growing competition because there are other bikes out there, electric and ICE, and I don't imagine there's much cross-shopping, which is interesting. People just aren't doing much A/B testing between gas and electric. It's like all the gas bike enthusiasts would never look at electric, and then all the electric bike enthusiasts, at least some of them, stem from EV ownership from other cars, and they're like, oh, what else is electric? So, I don't know. Cross-shopping, I think, will become more relevant, whatever. But for now, yeah, it's interesting. But underlying architecture is somewhat the same. I mean, the same kind of motor, more or less, a little bit different. But yeah, Showa fully adjustable shocks. We got 7.5 inches of suspension travel. And Showa, by the way, it's another 10-year partnership Zero's had. It's really pretty comfortable given the circumstances. I mean, look at how bumpy this road is. And it's doing the trick. Now I am riding it with out-of-the-box specs, so we didn't actually adjust any of the suspension. We just didn't really have time. I don't know if they really wanted to have that. They wanted to give everyone the exact same experience. So I'll play with that when we get one later on. But yeah, this is a fire road. It's not a crazy trail. But for ride modes, that's another big thing. 5 different ride modes: rain, sport, canyon, standard, and eco. Each of those modes has dedicated off-road variants. That's new and that's cool. It's like 10 riding modes basically, and you can configure it too. So for now, I'm on standard off-road, which they said they've done the most extensive testing on at the moment. Of course, they're still improving the testing and stuff over the year updates, which is cool. But that basically adjusts ABS and traction control to work tangentially and optimize itself for these off-road slippery conditions. In 2015, Zero was the first electric motorcycle with ABS. In 2020, they were the first one with stability control. So now they're taking all of that off-road. So the wheel slip associated with slippier, dirt-ridden surfaces, it takes all that into account. But I've had a few close calls, or at least what I felt like should be a close call compared to other bikes, but it always seems to catch me. Now the challenge is not leaning in not too much, because every system has its limits, and I'd rather not find the limits of this system right now. Wow, side note, this is just such a good view. I love this place so much. Anyways, yeah. I wish this was a more intense trail, but again, we'll get our own bike soon to do some more intense testing back home in Colorado on harder roads, put it through all of our usual paces, charging, range, all that. But as far as off-road capability beyond the SRF, again, they actually have more ground clearance. They did that by moving the motor controller back a bit, raising, I guess, the middle of the bike for more ground clearance, which, yeah, just helps the breakover angle, I guess. But 17-inch rear wheel, 19-inch front wheel, which the default option is cast wheels with Pirelli Scorpion 2 tires. Then optionally, you could get a more aggressive lace or wire wheels with Rally SRT Pirelli tires, all developed on the DSR-X. So they didn't just develop for one tire and then had another wheel tire option. They did all the development with both the street and the off-road wheels and tires. So this one is featuring the cast wheels with the Scorpion 2 tires, which are more on-road friendly. So now that we're on the road, let's actually talk a bit more about the specs. So the weight, 544 pounds, it is a little heavy, but the power makes that weight kind of disappear a little bit. 112 miles an hour top speed, so not crazy. And the power is 75 kilowatts or 100 horsepower and 166 pound-feet of torque. So you might notice that's a little bit less power than the 82 kilowatt and a bit more torque than the 140 pound-feet that's associated with their normal ZF10 motor. This is the ZF10X motor. So, all new, developed for this bike, done by adding a bit more copper into the motor, which improves the torque output. And yeah, we'll talk a bit more about the belt when I show you the Walkaround, but it's a wider and stronger belt, which is definitely fixing an issue we had with the other bikes we were testing prior. As far as battery, this is a 17.3 kilowatt hour battery, which is the largest standard battery they've ever put in a bike, and you can up that to nearly 21 kilowatt hours with the power tank. And then charging, 6.6 kilowatt charger, which gives you 0 to 95% in about 2 hours. It's scalable, so you can add another 6 kilowatt, cutting that charging time in half, which is absolutely rock solid for a bike, especially one without DC fast charging. And comfort, that's something a lot of people want to know. I already talked about that a bit on the trail, but now that we're on a smooth road, suspension, as you saw, good tuning for rough roads and really excellent on normal roads. Posterity is good, the handlebar height feels good. The NVH, smooth and quiet. Of course, that's what you get with the belt drive rather than a chain. Of course, people might do a chain conversion, but probably less than before with this new and improved belt that I mentioned. And the performance, the speed, just more torque, a little bit less power, but honestly, the other bikes are so powerful, you don't really need all that power. I think this one is actually tuned properly. It's how I'd want it tuned. And as far as the driving modes, now I'm in canyon mode, which is basically how I would test my normal mode, or set up my standard special mode I'd have with more regen and pretty good power. They didn't like max everything out. I'd probably have it all maxed out. I like having regen maxed out, which the sport mode does not have. So that's, you know, it's all to each your own, which is cool that you can actually calibrate that yourself. As far as range, now this is claimed to be up to 180 miles city, 220 if you have the power tank, which gives you that extra battery capacity. You won't get that on the highway, nowhere near that, but you'll still get a decent amount. And I will test that as soon as I can. But with this ride, seemed like we had decent efficiency. I mean, we basically had a 4-hour stint into the mountains of Park City, and I only used 30% of the battery. So now we didn't go that far. And of course, when you're going slower off-road, the range is great. The real-world testing claims 200 adventure off-road miles, which is 13 hours of riding. 155 miles if you do aggressive off-roading, which is 5 hours of aggressive riding. That's what they've tested in their real world. Again, I'll test that too, but yeah. Now, charging infrastructure is interesting. I guess we should talk charging in general because they have a new partnership with Backcountry Discovery Routes, BDR, which is awesome. Basically, you can do route planning with the BDR network, which there's chargers all over the place, especially in those kind of adventure-minded areas out in the world, in the more rural areas. And that's something funny that people always bring up with every new Zero because they still have not ventured into DC fast charging. Everyone's like, oh, how could they be so behind? But if you think about it, at least what they claim is level 2 charging is 90% of the infrastructure existing out there. So there's way more level 2 chargers. And when you have a battery this small, granted it's a bigger battery for a Zero, but compared to a car, way smaller. I mean, we're talking 20% of a car's battery size, depending on the car, of course. But level 2 charging still is a pretty quick charge. I mean, 2 hours or even less if you have the charge tank or better, upgraded chargers at home. I'm just glad they included AC charging. One of the competitors, elephant in the room, is the Livewire 1, which has DC fast charging. That got headlines, but that doesn't have level 2 charging. So it's either a trickle charge or a DC fast charge, which it can't even charge that fast because it's not that big of a battery. So I don't know. I see benefits of both, but I am okay with how Zero handled this. So let's kind of wrap this up with talking about cost. That's another elephant in the room. $24,495 starting, plus the plethora of accessories. So this bike will creep up there. The one they showed off in the showroom was about $32,000, which is a lot of money, but it's a lot of bike too. It's challenging to think about the cost, the value analysis. So yeah, it's not a cheap bike. It is cheaper than a lot of the competitors, but also more expensive than a lot of the gas bikes. But the cost is the cost. So let's take a quick break from riding and I'll show you a little walk around, kind of some of the ins and outs of the bike as we walk around it, a couple more things before we head back to our final thoughts. Right, so again, we'll have a much more in-depth review with this bike and a lot more testing and charging and everything like that. I love how it looks. Speaking of, let me just show you a really quick walk around before we get back to our final thoughts on the ride. So this is the beautiful sage green color. They will also have a white color. I don't know what they called it, like Frosty Ghost or something like that. No, probably not that. Don't quote me on that. But white or green, of course, with all the black accents and the bronze that you see on the motor itself, which looks really cool back there. Bronze right here. A little bronze badge on the 17.3 kilowatt hour battery pack. The biggest standard battery pack, which is really cool. Standard on the DSR X. There's the updated logo with the X now appended to it. And as far as I know, this is the bike as standard. So the windshield comes with it, which is fully adjustable. They even show in millimeters how high you're going. So I had it on high most of the ride and actually did a really good job of protecting me. You can lower it down, slim up the profile a little bit. There's the 19-inch front wheel with 120/70 tires. And these are the Scorpion Trail, looks like. So very off-road capable, as you could see by us taking them off-road, but very, very good on the street as well. The tail back here, which I'm sure a lot of people will just delete or clean up somehow. And then all the adjustability for the shocks, the preload down here, I think. And then you can adjust the shocks up here, looks like.
And then there's the screen, which is definitely dusty, but you get it fired up there. See all the warning lights, all your usual motorcycle riding stuff, and there it is in all of its glory. By the way, they quote on the range, I don't think I mentioned that, on this battery pack, 180 in mixed, or actually 180 city, and then if you get the power tank, that's actually like 220 or so, or at least over 200, which is really cool. And they claim real world testing, 200 miles on trails with 13 hours of riding time on this battery, not even with the power tank. And then aggressive riding, they said 155 miles. And that's if you do like 5 hours of aggressive riding. So this really is an all-day adventure bike. It just looks so cool back there. There's the Showa, all that heat sink dissipation. Really good thermals. I mean, it's a really hot day out here. We're kind of not really in the desert, but it was very, very hot. Never saw the temperature spike anywhere near the top, and we were really ripping it on the canyons. There's the rest of the guys over here. Nice big Zero tent. Really cool area. By the way, this is new on both regards. The belt, so they don't have chains, as many of you know. The belt system is actually almost an inch wide, 25 millimeters, up from the 20 that the SRF and SRS have. There are also all these holes. That is their solution for basically, because sometimes when you're off-roading, you're worried about debris getting up in there, and then the debris between the belt and the teeth are what will basically disintegrate the belt. These holes are between the sprocket's teeth, which help filter debris out of there. Things small enough like that will just fly right out. Also, it's more efficient to have this basically attached to the wheel right here. So instead of having the sprocket go to the middle and then the middle go up to the wheel and then the wheel spokes, that's like a little bit of lost energy. So they made it more efficient having this integrate with the wheel like that, and it just looks super cool too. So yeah, that's pretty much a first glance. Of course, they do have incandescent bulb turn signals. Honestly, that's something I will criticize indefinitely. For this price, they're trying to be a premium brand. They really kind of are. I feel like this feels like a very premium motorcycle. Looks the part, except for these. Of course, you can pay to upgrade them, but come on, just throw them in. It looks so much better. I think for the appearance alone, it would be worth it. Then the storage, quite a bit of storage in here, as I mentioned. That really fits a lot of stuff. And you can use the Allen key to take this off. I wish this was just a latch system as well, so you could easily access it. Or I wish these were just like all kind of encompassed in one. That would have been great, but I'll take it. Right in front of the storage cavity is the charging port, the J1772, which is awesome to have right there, easy to get to. And you don't have to choose between a charge tank or storage. So love that. Just wish this was a bit bigger. If you could fit a helmet in here, I mean, that would be insanely awesome. But there's plenty of other places you can latch a helmet to, I guess. Like I said, tons of accessories that will be provided to choose from. And the seat also opens up, which is right there. There we go. And there's a storage compartment for something else. It's almost like exactly phone sized. Would have been really funny if they threw a wireless charger in there. They also have these J1 brakes, the Showa suspension, of course, which they've been working with Showa for a long time. But that's pretty much it for first look. What do you guys think of the design, especially in light of some of the competition out there, including ice bikes, if you even know what ice is? I know most of our audience is electrically minded, but this is just really looks good. I loved the previous DSR. I mean, that was kind of my dream bike, and I've definitely looked for used options, but this just looks like such a machine, and it's something I would love to ride around on the roads and canyons in my home state of Colorado. So that's it for a really quick walk around. Loving the sage green too. Just yeah, looks good. Back to the ride.
So, some final thoughts. What did we set out to decide? Can it handle everything? Is it that perfect sweet spot that I've always dreamed of? Or would I be better off with a dedicated street bike and a dedicated trail bike? I guess that depends on your values of street and trail. If you are a hardcore canyon carver, pushing it to its limits, which is dangerous but fun, and then you're also a crazy adventure trail rider who wants no compromise, maybe it's not the best thing. But for someone like me, it's like they built this bike for me. Like I don't usually say that about vehicles I cover. I just want to give all the information to you guys so you can make a dedicated, educated decision. But I've realized I'd love that compromise. Like, it could be a little better on the street, it could be a bit more gnarly for trails, but I don't do the crazy trails and I don't do the insane streets. I just don't want to push it that hard. I still have tons of enjoyment by doing this. I mean, just this casual riding, look at this scenery around me, it's fantastic. So I still have a bit of sticker shock, but everything has risen in price. And on one hand, it's a lot of money for a motorcycle. Like we said, it's expensive, but for an EV with these specs, I mean, the 0 to 60 in what feels like less than 4 seconds, almost 200 miles of range, depending on driving, that feels actually pretty compelling. It's an EV for under 30 grand or thereabouts. Hopefully the tax credits maybe catch up to allow for more motorcycles to take advantage of that. That would be great, but we just don't have any news on that yet. But like I said, we're looking forward to getting more testing in on this, overlanding, charging, range, all the goodies. But for now, this has been a great first ride and a great first look. And it just gets me more excited about the adventure of the future of two-wheel electrification. Lots of new companies are popping up, but Zero does prove their rock-solid place in the industry every time I try one. So let me know what you think of the Zero DSR X. Is it the upgrade you've always wanted? Or are you looking at maybe one of their other bikes or a competitor? Or is it just not that much better than the old one? Love to hear your thoughts. We'll see you down in the comments.
Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.